Welcome back, deal seekers. You know we love diving into Gary Adkins and the IBC Club's savvy real estate investing strategies.
Right. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And today, we're unlocking his lease option REI blueprint.
Think of it as your crash course in finding those FSBO properties and structuring, those win-win-win sandwich lease option deals.
And when we talk about those win-win-win situations, we're talking about FSBOs, those for sale by owner properties where the seller might be a little stuck. Right.
Exactly. We're focusing on those sellers with little to no equity because that's where this creative financing magic really happens.
Okay, so for those who are maybe new to this whole lease option thing, can you break it down for us? What is it exactly?
Absolutely. A lease option, or sometimes it's called rent to own, gives the renter a choice. They can lease the property for a set period, but here's the kicker. They have the option to buy it later at a price that you agree on up front.
So it's like a safety net for the renter, and for the owner, it's like, hey, I might have a guaranteed sale down the line.
Exactly. It's a win-win right there.
Mhm.
But now, let's add the sandwich part to this whole equation.
Because you're not just talking about being a regular landlord here. You're the middleman in this whole, like, multi-layered deal.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. As the investor, you're holding the property through a lease purchase agreement with the homeowner, right? But then you turn around and offer a similar rent-to-own agreement to a tenant buyer.
You're like the filling in the sandwich.
Exactly. You're sandwiched between the homeowner and the tenant buyer, and that's where the magic really happens.
I'm already seeing dollar signs. We're talking about multiple streams of income, right?
Got it.
Right.
Gary calls these paydays. 3 of them, in fact.
3 paydays. Okay, I'm listening.
First, you often get a non-refundable option fee from your tenant buyer. It's instant cash flow. Then there's that monthly cash flow, that difference between what your tenant buyer is paying you and what you're paying the homeowner. And finally, the grand finale, if your tenant buyer secures financing and buys that property, boom, another payday.
So it's like layers of profit potential built into a single strategy.
You got it. And remember when we talked about those FSBO properties with little to no equity?
Yeah.
Those are your gold mines for this strategy.
Makes sense. They need options, and you're providing a solution. Let's rewind for a second and talk about that first payday, that non-refundable option fee. Is that something that's in every lease option agreement?
It's pretty standard. It shows the seller the tenant buyer is serious about buying. A gesture of good faith. And for you, it's instant cash flow.
Gotcha. It's not just about the money. It's about aligning everyone's interests. Now, what about that second payday, that monthly cash flow? That's where your negotiation skills really come into play, right?
Absolutely. Your goal is to create a gap between what your tenant buyer pays you and what you're paying the homeowner.
So it's like being a landlord, but with hopefully significantly higher returns.
You got it.
Okay, so now that third payday, that's the tenant buyer actually buying the property, right?
Right.
Now, that seems a little less certain. What if someone's in a lease option and they just, they don't end up buying?
That's where finding the right tenant buyer comes in. You want someone motivated to become a homeowner. Maybe they need to improve their credit score or save up for a down payment.
So it's really about finding the right tenant buyer who aligns with the strategy's long-term goals.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, so before we even get to the tenant buyer part, we need to find these properties, these hidden gem FSBOs. And the IBC Club really pushes using Zillow for that.
Oh, absolutely. Zillow is a gold mine if you know what you're doing.
Okay, so you're on Zillow. Where do you even start?
Head straight to those FSBO listings. Those sellers are already thinking creatively, going outside the traditional route. They might be more open to a lease option.
They're already speaking the language of creative financing.
Exactly. And Zillow lets you get super specific. You can target certain neighborhoods, set up property alerts. It's all about being proactive.
It's like digital detective work for real estate investors.
I like that. And don't be afraid to look at properties that have been sitting on the market for a while. Those sellers might be more willing to negotiate.
They're motivated. They want to move that property.
Yeah.
So say you find a property, you're on Zillow, you're ready to reach out to these FSBO sellers. What's next? How do you approach them? What do you say?
This is where it gets interesting. The IBC Club provides a script for that initial outreach. It's all about empathy and positioning yourself as the solution, not just another investor.
I like it. But we're going to have to wait till after the break to hear about that.
Stay tuned. Right, so you found that perfect property on Zillow. Now it's time to reach out to those FSBO sellers.
And the IBC Club, they've actually got a script for this.
They do. And it's not about, bombarding them with offers. Remember, These are real people with real situations.
Right, they might be feeling stuck, like we were talking about before.
Exactly. So the script encourages a more empathetic, human approach.
So, like, what does that look like in action? What kind of things are we saying in this initial message?
Okay, so they have this three-step approach. First, keep it simple, personalize it. Hi, seller's name. I saw your listing on Zillow for your property on address. Are you still considering offers? Something like that.
Straightforward, right to the point, no pressure.
Exactly. Now, if they respond positively, you move to step two. Acknowledge their situation. I know selling a property can be tough, especially in this market. Would you be open to sharing a bit more about your ideal situation? I might be able to offer a win-win solution that benefits us both.
I like that. You're acknowledging the challenges, you're positioning yourself as an ally, and you're piquing their interest all in one go.
Exactly. And then step three, you're offering that concrete next step without being too pushy. I have some creative ideas that could be a good fit for you. Would you be open to a quick chat to discuss?
Short, sweet, and to the point. I like it.
It's about opening that dialogue, understanding their needs, and, seeing if a lease option could be that mutually beneficial solution.
Okay, so we found the property, we've reached out to the seller, maybe we've even got that initial conversation going. Now we need to talk about the other half of that sandwich, finding those motivated tenant buyers.
Absolutely, because without that reliable tenant buyer, the whole strategy kind of falls apart.
Right, it's not a sandwich without the other slice of bread.
Exactly. And finding them, it's a lot like finding those properties. You've got to be strategic. Think like a marketer here, not just a landlord.
Okay, so how do you effectively market a rent-to-own opportunity? What are we doing?
Think a multi-pronged approach. You got to combine the power of online and offline marketing. You want to reach those aspiring homeowners who are, ready for this kind of opportunity.
Cast a wide net.
Exactly.
So online, what are we talking about? What platforms are we using?
Online, you've got Facebook, Craigslist, even those niche real estate websites that are specifically for rent-to-own properties.
Okay, so we know where we're posting. What about the content? What are we actually saying in these ads?
Highlight those benefits. Think about those catchy headlines, rent to own your dream home today. Or, bad credit, no problem. Explore your home ownership options. Things like that.
You're speaking directly to their needs, their aspirations.
Right. And don't be afraid to get creative with those visuals. Use those high-quality pictures of the property. Tap into that emotional appeal.
Help them envision themselves living there.
Exactly. Now, offline marketing is just as important. Network with local businesses, community organizations. You can even try churches.
Okay, so we're talking flyers in coffee shops, laundromats, community centers.
Exactly. You're getting your message in front of the right people.
Okay, so the leads are coming in. What's next?
Now it's time to screen these potential tenant buyers.
Right.
This is where you separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
Finding that right fit.
Exactly. But, we can delve into that after a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be back in a flash to talk about how to make sure you're choosing a tenant buyer who sets you both up for success. Okay, so we're back, and we are ready to talk about finding that perfect tenant buyer.
This is where all that hard work, all that due diligence, it really pays off.
Because we're not just finding a tenant, right? This is about more than just filling a vacancy.
Right. You're essentially choosing your successor, the person who's potentially going to buy that property.
It's a big decision. So what does the IBC Club recommend? How do we screen these potential tenant buyers?
Thoroughness is key. We're talking credit checks, background checks, verifying employment, verifying income. You want the whole picture.
You're really putting on that mortgage lender hat, huh?
Exactly. You want to evaluate their financial stability, make sure they can actually get that mortgage.
Their success is your success in this whole thing.
Exactly. The IBC Club even suggests going a step further and assessing their mortgage readiness. You can have them pre-qualify with a lender, or you can even do a more in-depth readiness assessment. You want to see how likely they are to get approved within that lease option term.
So you're giving them a head start on the mortgage process.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, so you found that perfect tenant buyer. They check all the boxes. Now what?
Now it's time to craft that lease option agreement.
That's the rule book, right?
Exactly. This document is the backbone of that whole sandwich lease option strategy.
Okay, so what are some of those key things that need to be spelled out crystal clear in that agreement?
Clarity is key here. You want to avoid any misunderstandings down the line. So that means outlining the purchase price, which, remember, we're basing that on the projected future value.
We're thinking about appreciation.
Right. And then, of course, you've got that option fee we talked about before.
That's important.
Very important. That secures the tenant buyer's right to buy the property at that agreed upon price.
And usually that fee goes towards the purchase price if they actually buy it, right?
Exactly. And let's not forget the rent credit. That's the portion of the rent that they're paying each month that's being put aside and can also be applied to the purchase price.
It's like a built-in savings plan.
Right. Now, you'll also want to outline the lease term. Usually it's 1 to 3 years. That gives the tenant buyer time to improve their credit, save for that down payment, really just get comfortable with the whole idea of owning a home.
It's like a trial run of homeownership.
Exactly. And of course, you'll want to outline who's responsible for maintenance, repairs, just like a regular landlord-tenant situation.
Always good to be clear about that stuff.
Absolutely. And lastly, you want to outline the consequences of default for both parties. What happens if the tenant buyer misses a rent payment or if they decide not to buy?
Got it. You've got to have those contingencies in writing. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. We talked about finding those hidden gem properties, crafting the perfect message to those FSBO sellers, marketing rent-to-own opportunities, and even screening those potential tenant buyers. What's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
This strategy, this sandwich lease option, it's a powerful tool for investors, especially if you're looking for those creative financing solutions, and it can really help those aspiring homeowners achieve that dream. But it's not passive. You got to be diligent, you got to know your market, and you got to know how to build relationships.
But the payoff could be huge. We're talking about multiple paydays.
Exactly. It's a win-win-win.
I like it. Well, on that note, thank you so much for diving into this with us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy investing.